I am 73 years old. That number still surprises me when I say it out loud. Inside, I often feel much younger until my knees remind me otherwise, or until I stand in my kitchen at night, listening to the refrigerator hum and realize there is no one else in the house to hear it. My name is Margaret. Most people just call me Maggie. I am a mother of one son, or at least I used to think that meant something. I decided to tell this story not because I want pity, but because silence has become heavier than truth. And because when your own child turns you into a stranger, you start questioning your entire life. This is the story of my family and how it slowly disappeared. When he was small, my son Daniel was born on a rainy Thursday morning in October. I remember holding him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapping around mine like he was afraid I might disappear. And maybe in some way I did disappear, not physically, but emotionally, piece by piece, as mothers often do. I raised Daniel mostly alone. His father left when Daniel was 4. No dramatic goodbye, no final conversation. Just a note on the kitchen table and a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. From that day on, it was just me and my boy. I worked 2 jobs. I learned how to stretch meals, how to fix things myself, how to cry silently in the bathroom so my son wouldn't hear. I missed school plays because of night shifts. I missed birthdays because rent didn't care about candles and cake. But I loved him. God, I loved him. I told myself that one day when he grew up, he would understand. That one day he would see how hard I tried. That belief kept me alive. The distance begins. Daniel grew into a polite, intelligent young man. He went to college, something I was endlessly proud of. I remember crying when I helped him pack his car. He hugged me awkwardly, already half gone. "I'll call you every week, Mom," he said. He did, at first. Then it became once a month. Then holidays. Then only when I called first. I told myself this was normal. Children grow up. They build lives. Mothers learn to step back. But something felt cold. When Daniel married his wife Claire, I tried very hard to be welcoming. I cooked meals she liked. I asked about her job. I complimented her home. She was polite but distant, always polite, never warm. She corrected the way I spoke, the way I cooked, the way I folded, laundry when I stayed over. Little things. Daniel started defending her, quietly at first. "She didn't mean it that way, Mom. You're too sensitive. That's just how she is." And slowly, my words mattered less. The phone call happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I had just finished washing dishes and my hands still smelled like soap. I was tired, but hopeful. Daniel was calling me without me calling first. I smiled when I answered. "Hi, sweetheart." There was a pause. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk." That sentence alone made my stomach tighten. He told me they were busy, that life was expensive, that they had their own family now. Then he said the words that still echo in my head at night. "Don't expect me to take care of you when you're old. I have my own life and responsibilities." I didn't know what to say. I laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept it. "I'm not asking you to take care of me," I said softly. "I just thought I'd always be part of your life." Another pause. Claire's voice whispered something in the background. Daniel sighed. "Mom, you depend on me emotionally too much." Emotional. I thanked him for being honest. I told him I understood. And then I sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours, staring at nothing. Christmas without me that year, Christmas came quietly. No decorations in my house. What was the point? The tree felt like a mockery of joy I no longer had. A week before Christmas, Daniel texted me. "Just so you know, this year we're celebrating at Claire's parents' house. She's not comfortable having you there." Not comfortable. I typed and deleted my response at least 10 times. In the end, I wrote, "I understand. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas." That night, I cried myself to sleep like a child who had been forgotten at school. On Christmas morning, I made myself tea and sat by the window. Snow fell quietly, as if the world itself was whispering. I wondered when I had become someone people needed to be protected from. The house full of ghosts. My home is full of memories. Daniel's childhood drawings still sit in a box in the closet. His height marks are still on the door frame. His old room remains untouched, frozen in time. Sometimes I sit on his bed and imagine his voice, his laughter, the way he used to ask me if monsters were real. Now I am the monster, or at least that's how it feels. I stopped calling as often. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be too much. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into silence. The hospital visit last winter, I fell in my kitchen. Nothing dramatic, just a slippery floor and tired legs. I broke my wrist and bruised my ribs. The nurse asked if I had family. Yes, I said, a son. Should we call him? I hesitated. Yes, I said again, please. Daniel didn't come. He sent a message instead. Sorry, Mom, we're busy. Hope you recover soon. I stared at my phone, surrounded by strangers, and realized something terrifying. I was truly alone. What hurts the most? What hurts the most isn't the absence, it's the erasure, the feeling that my role in his life has been reduced to an inconvenience, that my sacrifices have been forgotten, that my love has expired. I don't want his money. I don't want his house. I don't even want his care. I just want it to matter. After the hospital, I tried to convince myself that things would change. People always say moments like that, falls, illness, fear, remind families of what truly matters. I waited for a call. I waited for an apology. I waited for some sign that my son still cared. Nothing came. So I did what I had always done my whole life. I adjusted. Learning to be invisible, I stopped mentioning how lonely I felt. When Daniel called, rarely, I asked only about him, about his job, about Claire, about the children I had barely met. Yes, I'm fine, I said every time he asked. Yes, everything is good. Lies become easier with age. I didn't want to be accused of guilt tripping. I didn't want to be labeled dramatic or manipulative, words I had heard Claire use once when she thought I couldn't hear. So I became smaller, quieter, safer, meeting my grandchildren like a stranger. The first time I met my grandchildren, they were already walking and talking. I remember kneeling down, opening my arms, smiling wide. They looked at me like I was a visitor. Who's that? The little boy asked. That's Grandma, Daniel said quickly, his voice tense. Grandma. The word felt foreign in my mouth. The children were polite, curious, but distant, the way children are with someone they don't know. And I realized with a sharp, unbearable pain that I didn't know them either. I hadn't been there for their first steps, their first words, their first fears. I watched Claire guide them gently away from me when they became restless. Don't bother Grandma, she said with a thin smile, as if I were fragile, as if I were temporary. The unspoken rules? Whenever I visited, there were rules. Don't show up unannounced. Don't stay too long. Don't give advice unless asked. Don't bring old habits into their home. I followed every rule carefully, like walking through a room full of glass. Once I offered to help cook dinner. Claire smiled politely. We already have a system. Another time, I suggested a bedtime story, the same one I used to read to Daniel. We do things differently here, she said, and Daniel said nothing. That silence hurt more than her words. A letter I never sent that night. I wrote a letter to Daniel. I told him how proud I was of him, how much I loved him, how lonely I had become. I told him I didn't need him to take care of me. I just needed him to remember me. I folded the letter neatly, and then I put it in a drawer because I was afraid he would read it and feel annoyed, afraid Claire would read it and call me manipulative, afraid I would lose what little contact I still had. So the letter stayed hidden, like my feelings. Growing older in silence time does strange things when you are alone. Days blend together, weeks pass unnoticed. Birthdays arrive quietly and leave the same way. On my 72nd birthday, Daniel sent a short message. Happy birthday, Mom. Hope you're doing well. No call, no visit. I baked myself a small cake and ate one slice. The rest went into the trash a few days later. I stopped buying extra groceries, stopped setting two plates, stopped expecting anything. The question that changed everything one afternoon, my neighbor asked me a simple question. Do your children visit often? I smiled politely. They're busy. That night, the question echoed in my mind. Busy with what? With life? With love? With people who mattered more? I realized then that I had been waiting my whole life for someone who had already moved on. Letting go without goodbye, I made a decision. I stopped calling first. I stopped sending messages. I wanted to see what would happen if I disappeared. Weeks passed, then months. No one noticed. And that was the most painful truth of all. What I learned too late, I learned that love, when unreciprocated, becomes a quiet form of grief. I learned that being a good mother does not guarantee being a remembered one. And I learned that sometimes children don't abandon their parents out of cruelty, but out of comfort. It is easier to forget than to confront. Aging doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small humiliations, a jar you can't open, a name you forget for a moment too long, a staircase you climb more slowly than before. And with each small loss, the world becomes a little quieter. The doctor's words I found out about my heart on a gray Monday morning. The doctor spoke gently, the way people do when they're trying not to scare you. It's manageable, he said, but you shouldn't be alone. Do you have family? That question again. Yes, I answered automatically. A son. The doctor nodded, writing something down. Good. Make sure he knows. I nodded too, but inside I already knew the truth. The call, I almost didn't make it. Took me 3 days to call Daniel. I rehearsed the conversation in my head, how to sound calm, how not to sound needy, how to make my illness seem small. When he answered, I could hear children in the background. Hi, Mom, he said, distracted. I went to the doctor. I said, they found something with my heart. Silence. Then, is it serious? I don't know yet, I said. They said I should have someone around more often. Another pause. Claire's voice again, distant but clear enough. We can't rearrange everything. Daniel sighed. I'm sorry, Mom. We just don't have the capacity right now. Capacity. As if love had a limit, I thanked him for listening. When the call ended, I sat very still, afraid that if I moved, something inside me would break permanently. Preparing for the end alone after that, I began preparing, not dramatically, quietly. I organized my papers. I wrote down passwords. I labeled boxes. I stood in my house and asked myself, if I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone notice? I donated clothes. I gave away furniture. I kept only what I truly needed. I even wrote a will. Daniel was in it. Of course, though, was doesn't disappear just because it isn't returned. The last letter, this time, I did write a letter, not one filled with accusations or sadness, a simple one. I told Daniel I loved him, that I was proud of him, that I understood he had his own life, and then I wrote one sentence that took me an hour to finish. If one day you wonder whether I was lonely, the answer is yes, but I never blamed you. I sealed the envelope and placed it in a drawer labeled important. I didn't send it, not yet. The fall no one saw, the second fall, happened at night. I don't remember much, just pain, the cold floor, the sound of my own breathing. I lay there for hours, no phone in reach, no voice calling my name. At some point, I stopped being afraid. I thought about Daniel as a little boy, asleep in my arms. I thought about how love begins and ends quietly. When morning came, I managed to crawl to the phone. The ambulance arrived. This time, no one asked if I had family. A familiar room, hospitals, all smell the same. I lay in bed, watching nurses come and go, each kind but temporary. Days passed, no visits. On the third day, a young nurse sat with me. Would you like us to call someone? She asked. I smiled gently. No, I said. I don't want to bother anyone. She squeezed my hand. That small touch meant more than she could ever know. The call that came too late, Daniel called on the fifth day. I just heard you were in the hospital, he said, breathless. Yes, I replied. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at the ceiling. You were busy, I said. Silence. I can come by tomorrow, he said finally. Tomorrow. A word full of regret. I'll be discharged today, I said. There's no need. Another pause. I'm sorry, Mom. I believed he meant it, but apologies. Don't rewind time. When I finally understood lying there, I understood something clearly for the first time. My son wasn't evil. He wasn't cruel. He was simply gone. And holding on to someone who has already left only hurts the person who stays behind. Choosing peace when I returned home, I made tea and sat by the window again. The same window, the same snow. But I felt different. I wasn't waiting anymore. I mailed the letter the next morning, not as a plea, but as a goodbye. If this is the end of my story, I want it known. I love deeply. I tried honestly. I forgave silently. And if my son ever reads this, I hope he understands not what he lost, but what he was given. Love, unconditional, even at the end. The letter reached Daniel 3 days after I mailed it. I know this because he told me later. At the time, I was at home, sitting in my chair by the window, watching the light move slowly across the floor. My body felt weaker than usual, but my mind was calm. For the first time in years, I was not waiting for the phone to ring. When Daniel called, his voice was different. Not rushed, not distracted, just quiet. Mom, he said, I got your letter. I closed my eyes. I didn't mean to worry you, I replied. You didn't, he said quickly. You you made me think. That sentence alone felt like something I had waited decades to hear. He told me he had read the letter twice, that he had sat in his car afterward, unable to start the engine. I didn't realize, he said. I honestly thought you were okay. I almost laughed, but instead, I said the truth. I stopped telling you when it felt like it didn't matter anymore. Silence filled the space between us. What he finally admitted, I was afraid, Daniel said at last. Of what? Of becoming responsible for you, of failing you, of disappointing Claire, of not being enough for everyone. I listened, not as a wounded mother, but as an old woman who had finally learned to let go. I never wanted you to carry me, I said. I just wanted to walk beside you. He cried then. I could hear it. And for the first time in years, I did not feel invisible. The visit Daniel came the next weekend. Alone. When I opened the door, he stood there awkwardly, like a boy again. We hugged. It was brief, careful, but real. He looked around the house, the same house he had grown up in, and I saw something shift in his eyes. I forgot, he whispered. I forgot this was home too. We talked for hours, not about blame, about memories, about silence, about time. He apologized. I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. What didn't change? He did not promise to call every day. He did not promise to visit every week, and I did not ask him to. Some things cannot be rebuilt fully once they have collapsed, but something had softened, and sometimes that is enough. My last winter, that winter was cold, but gentle. Daniel called more often, short calls, simple ones. How are you today? Did you eat? Did it snow there? Small things, important things. I grew weaker, but not afraid. Loneliness no longer sat beside me at night. Acceptance did. The morning I didn't wake up, I went to sleep after finishing a book. The house was quiet, peaceful. I did not feel pain. I did not feel fear. I simply rested. After me, Daniel found the box in my drawer, the one labeled important. Inside were photos, letters, notes from his childhood, and one final page written in shaky handwriting. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. Please don't carry guilt. Carry memory instead. Love your children without waiting for repayment. And remember, I never stopped loving you. Daniel cried over that letter longer than he had cried at the funeral. What remains, I am gone. But I am not erased. I live in the way Daniel hugs his children now, in the patience he practices, in the phone calls he makes before it's too late. If you're listening, if you are listening to this story and you still have time, call your mother, visit your grandmother, say the things you think can wait. One day they can't. The end